Delighted once again on our programme here on Destination Newry to feature local writing and local excellence. And Peter O'Hanlon's with me, Tony Carroll is with me. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Good morning.
So the boys are part and parcel of the Newry Writers Group, which we've been hearing about 2 a day over the last week, and that'll continue in the week ahead. And it's very reassuring to know that this kind of activity is going on. And they gather in the library of the Phoenix Bar on the first Monday of every month. And there, amid the conviviality of companionship and libation, perhaps, they will talk and they will write and they will do good things. You're welcome, boys. Tony, when did you start the writing thing? I suspect a long time ago.
No, but I only started this year about a year ago.
Yeah, but you were writing since you were knee-high to a grasshopper.
Okay, I was writing, but I mean, that was all. I was writing, that was it.
Where did it come from? Well, you started as a child. Is it a natural talent you felt that you were given?
Oh God, no.
Well, what happened?
Did a few courses. Open university courses. Now.
Yeah. Is it possible to be taught how to write?
Oh yes. Oh, I'd say so.
And what was the guidance you were given about writing?
Well, I wasn't. The guidance was just to write whatever everyday things. Just write about everyday things, and then just keep writing. And then when you have that finished, then go on to something else. But the part of it is just to write, and you'd be able to after a while you'd be able to pick it up, and then you end up with
a book.
Right.
Wow. You're a happy man. You got a good smile. I see this. I tell you. I always say this, and every time I look at you, I see your Uncle Francie in your eyes through the gold-rimmed specs. He was a great missioner from Newry, Archbishop Francis Carroll, after whom we have called the Carroll Gallery in the Arts Centre. And this was a man of great excellence in Liberia. And we're very proud to have known that man. He was a good man.
Oh, he was. He was a very
huge
good man.
Yes. in our midst in Newry. Well, he'll be happy wherever he is in heaven to know that I have my book of the last 10 years of travels in Africa and India down on the chalks ready for publication.
Oh, very good.
But you both would know, boys, the big question when you're writing isn't how do I start, it's how do I stop?
Yeah.
When do you know you're finished, Peter O'Hanlon, writer. And when did you start the writing?
I started writing many years ago. I'd always had a great interest in history and books. So I was always picking bits up here and there, and I suppose I've been involved in books all my life.
Yeah.
And before I started creative writing, I'd written stuff on history and all kinds of stuff like that.
And were you surrounded by books at home as you were growing up?
Yes, and I always loved them from I first learned to read. And I still buy them by the hundreds.
Do you? So you're coming down with books in your house?
Coming down with books of all kinds.
You don't strike me. You strike me more as a book man than a Kindle man.
I wouldn't. I believe that you don't read a book. You become part of it when you read it.
That's an interesting philosophy.
You live the story in your own way.
Yeah. And you're also, dare I suggest it, you're also painting your own pictures.
That's another thing. You paint a picture in your own mind and then you put it into words on paper. Absolutely.
And you're also seeing as people, there's something about, I'm not so good at the paperbacks, but the hardback that's sewn into the words, the pages are sewn into, and that it's leather perhaps, and you smell it and you open it and you get the feel of it and all of that. This is the sort of stuff that, still exists from having been written and put together maybe 200 years ago.
I have books over 100 years old.
Wow, yeah.
All kinds of everything. I still buy them and collect. I bought one by a local man on Saturday.
Which local man?
Joseph Guinan.
That's a name.
Dating back to his son Martin published it away in the 1990s.
Wow, yeah.
And
what's your favourite? Have you a favourite type of writing?
Don't have a favourite type of writing.
Do you go for fiction or do you go for non-fiction?
I go for whatever I'm interested in
at that particular
moment in time.
Tony, same question applies to you.
Yeah, the same. I remember the book club in the library, And we just
Susan Lavery was the librarian,
Yeah.
and it was for the Boulevard. Maybe you're talking about a more recent library. I'm going back.
Oh no, this is the
older.
library at the moment.
No, the old library was fabulous, and the new one is great, for goodness sake. It's a great place for recreation. But Susan Lavery was the great librarian, and the old library used to be where the Boulevard restaurant
Yeah,
is today.
that's
Do you
right.
remember that? Yeah.
Yes, I remember reading it many times.
Ah, yeah. So, Tony, the sort of stuff you like reading, what is it?
Well, anyway, I like reading historical. I like reading Irish history, and from the Irish point of view, not from
Yes.
I
I see this reflected in some of your scribblings in the letters column of the Irish News, dear boy.
Yeah, as well.
Yes. But it would be, there would be a strong guttural roar from deep within you of Irish, Irish pride, let's say. It's funny the way we find it difficult to say either it's Irish nationalism, Irish republicanism. What are the kind of attendant tags that go with that? So I go for Irish pride,
Oh, wow.
and it is an Irish pride. It's a Celticism, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Today the President of Ireland will be heading up to the Hebrides. He's gone up to open out his Celticism and his awareness of the Celtic islands and all of that, which is good, So the Newry Writers Club came on the scene, and the President of Ireland hasn't yet come down to the Phoenix on a Monday evening, but it's entirely possible that he will.
He's
We
welcome.
can do it. Which I know it. I've told him that. I've said the lads would welcome you. He's very, very good.
He hasn't been asked yet, but
No.
we're in the process.
He told me he would send Sabina. I'm the President of Ireland now. He's a great lad, and he's for his time really, and he's there, ordinary, reaching out warmly to people. I never thought he would get it, but he did.
Yes.
He did. He got it indeed, and that's good. That's good. So Tony, the Writers Club, that must have been. Was there a kind of a moment when you opened a paper and said, "We would like members for our Newry Writers Group," and you said, "Oh, I want to be in that," or how did it work?
Well, to be truthful, I bought the last book, the first book that they wrote, and I met Stephen McCann down the town, and Stephen had one of his stories, and I says they were fantastic stories, and I said, "How do you go about, joining?" He says, "You just come down on the first Monday of the month,"
Yep.
and that's what I did, and it worked from there.
And yourself, Peter?
It was a similar thing. I met Patsy Quinn, who was involved in the group at that time, and I'd met him at various music sessions and that, and he said, "Sir, you've been involved in writing before, why don't you come along to us?" So I went along, and that's a few years ago, and I'm still...
Yeah, it's a kind of a knock-on effect, because I remember Patsy talking about writing, not writing. And he'll tell you this himself, I'm not telling a lie. I said, "Stop it! Stop talking about it! Go and do it!"
Yes, which is the thing.
And it's getting off your ass and doing it, or sitting down in your ass and doing it, and starting to write it. But you're writing now. How often would you ask both of you this? How often would you, Tony Carroll, be writing?
I usually once a week. I usually put down if I usually hear something downtown or hear a bit. I heard somebody was telling me about the other day. His mother was saying that he maintained that his father couldn't hammer a nail into a wall.
Wow!
So I wrote a story around
about hammering a nail into the wall.
Yeah.
And Peter, how often would you sit down in front of the typewriter?
Oh, sometimes I could go for several days, and then I had to stop myself.
Yeah.
Sometimes in the middle of the night, which is a great favourite with me.
It is, of course, yeah. And you get ideas in the middle of the night which you confidently tell yourself from your drowsiness and your bed of sleeping that, "Oh, I'll remember that in the morning."
That's correct.
No, you don't remember it unless you write it down. You're
That's
gone.
correct.
It's gone from you.
Well, I've been known to jump out of bed and go and write something down.
Wow. Eureka. Eureka. Well, I've been doing, apart from any other things, my column in the Democrat, I've been doing that now for 14 years. And it's only 600 words. It's only 600 words each week. But I take 2 days. I allocate 2 days a week to do it, which is the right thing, because I could go now and I could do 600 words in 15 minutes, as you could as well. But it's the quality of what you're having. And once you've got the matrix down, once you've got the outline of it down, you then start to work it. Is that how you guys work or not?
Yeah, I think every writer's their own
Way of doing it.
variation on the same theme.
And would you use a computer or longhand or what?
I use longhand. I have a computer, but I've sheets of paper lying everywhere in piles.
But the shame is, I understand that, and maybe that's okay, but you really do need to archive what you're doing, both of you, and all of your writers group, because only so much of it will get into books, you know, but you need to have your own personal archive for posterity, for your own family.
Well, I got into a habit many years ago, somebody said to me, is to write the date on everything you have written and everything you write. Just put the date on the top of the page.
Wow.
And that comes back to you.
Does it?
I can look at stuff now I've written 30 years ago.
Wow, 30 years ago.
Yeah, you know, and know when it was written.
Are you good at writing? Is it fiction or fact? What's your best?
I'd say more fact, but
Fact. See, there's a reporter in you. You know it's there, and you see it, and you write about it.
is anything ever fact? It's a variation on it.
Ah, yeah, of course.
You know,
yeah,
and that's
you're
it.
absolutely right. We were saying there earlier, I was reading this story of the boys who died in the horrible car accident. The reporter writing the story had talked about and you'll understand what I'm saying here.
Yeah,
they
the
talked
horror.
about the horror crash. Why is it necessary to say the horror crash?
It's just
It's self-evidently horrible. And I remember a long time ago, he wrote Fire Over Ulster. He was a great journalist with the newsletter. His name escapes me now because I'm growing old. And I remember being very proud of my first big column in the Armagh Observer. And I sent it down to him, and I said, I knew him from the time we founded the Alliance Party. And I sent it down to him, and he wrote back to me. And he said, young man, I thought it was great. You know, you're the bee's knees. I want to hear how wonderful and beautiful I am, really. You know, that sort of stuff. He said, young man, he said, in your writing, stand naked as a Grecian statue. Cut, 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 and cut again.
That's right.
It's good advice, that.
Oh, it was.
That's it.
Oh, yes.
We shall now test you to see if you have employed that advice, Mr. Carroll. Tony, you take us forward there. What is this story about?
This story is called The Pan. It's by my mother. My late mum.
God love her.
Yeah. Anyway, this only just the pan. The pan was used extensively in our house when we were young. There were 10 children, 2 parents and 1 granny to be catered for, and my mother was the chief cook. The only time the pan was not used was when we had a roast or a stew for dinner. But even so, the pan came out on a Monday with the remains of the Sunday roast. It was cut into pieces and fried on the pan along with the remains of the vegetables. Tuesday's dinner was usually minced meat made into patties, fried on the pan, removed, and the beans added in the grease and fried. Wednesday was rashers and sausage with green peas. Thursday was pork day. If it wasn't a pork fillet, it was pork chops, all finished with a liberal helping of beans, and sometimes beans and green peas together. Friday was fish and chips. The potatoes were peeled and sliced and put into the chip pan, which usually contained a pound or 2 of lard. There was another item that was used. Another item that was used extensively: lard. It was put on the pan to give the food that extra taste. Saturday was stew day, and Saturday night was frying night. These dinners and their days seldom ever varied. Everyone knew what day of the week it was by the dinner on the table. Mom tried to change it once in a while, but had to give up with the chorus of disapproval from her children and our dad, and had to revert back to the old routine. Even as time went on and the children left home, the dinners seldom varied. Then there was one day Mum was watching a health program on television, and the presenter said that frying lard and anything to do with was bad for you. The only healthy way to cook meats was to grill them. So Mum, who is now in her 70s, decided that grilling was the new way for her. The day she picked to start our healthy eating was on a Thursday. The potatoes were put in a pot and boiled, while the beans were put in another pot to be heated. Pork chops were put onto the grill. My brother Frank watched as Mum kept checking to make sure they were done properly. When she was quite sure they were ready, she put the plates out, put the potatoes on it, and then the beans, and lastly the grilled chops on them. She surveyed the dinners, thought for a minute, and without further ado lifted the grill pan and poured the grease over the chops, over the dinners. Satisfied, she put the dinners out on the table. Frank asked her, "Mum, are you not defeating the whole purpose of grilling?" "Ach," she replied, "she wants a dinner without some grease." The next day the pan was back, but without the lard.
It's vivid. It's
True story.
It's a true story, but the way you tell it is wonderful. It bounces along there. I'm in the kitchen, and it's bringing me back to my memories of my own childhood kitchen at home. My mother on a Saturday night would have made soup in the green kitchen that also held our bikes. You know, you can see it and you can smell it as you go. Peter, what have you got for me?
I have a little one here called "Put a Bit of Salt on Its Tail." And it's self-explanatory as it goes on. I spent much of my early childhood growing up in an old single-storey farmhouse with massively thick walls, tiny latticed windows, and a dark green half door that opened onto the farmyard. The outside walls were whitewashed from the broad band of tar at the bottom up to the eaves. It was a busy working farm with pigs, cattle, a pony, and a variety of fowls such as hens, ducks and geese. All the furniture in the house was very old, and tucked away in one of the bedrooms was an ancient bookcase, packed full of dusty volumes of Victorian classics. I had learned to read several years before, so I am now starting to become interested in almost any book. As most of the books available were a bit complicated for a small boy, I developed a preference for reading newspapers and magazines. Due to being very young and innocent, I naturally believed that every word written in these publications was bound to be factually accurate, and therefore absolutely true. I was always on the lookout for something new, and one day I spotted a different copy of Woman's Own casually disregarded on one of the kitchen chairs. So I carried it off to my reading spot, which was one of the deep windowsills in a bedroom. It was fascinating because it was full of new things like patterns and instructions for knitting mittens, recipes and colour photographs of exotic looking foods, and a wide selection of advertisement for such diverse things as sewing machines, OXO cubes, Bisto, and one in particular that caught my attention and held me totally spellbound. It was for Cerebus salt, and showed a blue and white cylindrical container made of cardboard, standing about 6 inches tall, containing 2 metal ends with a hinge pourer on the top. Wrapped around the container was a scene picturing a small boy in short pants, with one arm fully extended in front of him, the hand gripping a Cerebus salt drum, from which poured a steady stream of salt. Below this stream was a chicken running with its wings partly outstretched as though in flight, and around the drum was written the words, "If you want to catch a chicken, put a bit of salt on its tail." I was fascinated at discovering this new fact, and resolute with the idea of somehow getting my hands on a drum of this magical salt and carrying out my own experiment. My initial inquiries were made to my teacher, my reasoning being that teachers knew everything, so she should know what I wanted. The teacher told me that Cerebus was not magical, but just like any other salt, and that the story was only a legend. I was disappointed, but didn't believe her, so I asked my elder sister, and to my dismay she said the same. So finally I asked my mother, and she agreed with the teacher, but I was still not convinced. In fact, I came to the conclusion that if Cerebus was only normal table salt, then any drum would have the same desired effect on the chicken. So if only I could get my hands on a similar drum of salt, then I'd be able to carry out my experiment and successfully prove them all wrong. Some time passed and I forgot all about my chickens and salt dilemma until I was in the kitchen watching my mother making a batch of soda bread on the griddle above the fire. She poured the flour, baking soda and buttermilk into the bowl, and then casually asked me to pass her the salt from the kitchen cupboard, as she had flour in her hands. When I opened the cupboard door, there in full view was a drum of salt which bore the name Saxa. My heart skipped a beat, and my plan from months ago returned. So I decided that the first chance I got, I would use the Saxa salt drum as a way of proving my theory to be true. It had been a showery day, and so when the sun came out, my mother chased all of us children out to play, and I didn't get a chance to carry out my secret mission. Over the next few days, we were at school, and homework spoiled all my plans. But when the next weekend came, after several close calls, I was able to liberate the Saxa drum and hide it in one of the farm sheds. Like all great scientific experiments, it was paramount that the field conditions were perfect. So I carefully guided the chickens towards the garden behind the house. It was a large plot of land with only a small section used for vegetables by my father. He planted carrots, parsnips, beetroot, cabbage, peas and beans, and several rows of potatoes. The rest of the garden was overgrown with large groups of stinging nettles. Eventually, having slowly and carefully manoeuvred the chickens into the desired location, I retrieved my drum of salt from its hiding place and selected the desired chicken that was to take unwittingly part in my groundbreaking experiment. So with the drum grasped firmly in both hands, I crept to within striking distance of my quarry, and having opened the pora, I extended the drum and began to chase like the boy on the service drum. The chicken quickly abandoned its scratching and fled squawking with me in full pursuit, a steady stream of salt pouring onto the ground just behind the chicken. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get close enough to put the salt on its tail. Soon the rest of the flock joined in the din, and within a minute or two one of the back windows was thrown open, and my mother shouted at me to stop chasing the chickens and come into the house at once. As soon as I came in, I immediately burst into a flood of tears, because in my excitement to catch the chicken, I had forgotten that I was wearing short pants and my legs were now covered in a multitude of nettle stings. When the pain had gone, I was scolded and told that advertisements were nothing more than a means of getting people to buy things, and not always accurate in every way. It taught me my first lesson in truth, that if you believe all you read, you would eat all you see.
You'd need to put your salt on the chicken after you've cooked it. I want to believe that's true.
It's actually true that
I want to believe that you did that.
I did.
That's gorgeous.
I was that small boy.
That's lovely that you would have done, because we might have all in our deep recesses of our imaginations might in those days have wanted to do the same thing.
Oh.
You took it to the extent it did it. Sean, we'll have some music, shall we? Don't go away, lads. We'll keep chatting. It'll be good.